Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and no, this is not actually a negative video towards Xbox. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I think Microsoft needs to just drop the old Xbox and let them partner off and do whatever they need to. Ladies and gentlemen, I love video games, and to be fair with you, one of my favorite video game consoles has been the Xbox 360. You know, growing up with the old 360, hanging out with the boys on the party chats, playing that Halo 3 custom lobbies, those are memories that I hold near and dear to my heart. And unfortunately, I can't say that these days I'm actually much of an Xbox gamer. The last Xbox game that I bought was like Forza Horizon 6 on Steam, and I couldn't even remember the last time I engaged in a purchase with Xbox since then. Probably with like Halo Infinite. When Microsoft jacked up its prices for Game Pass, I pulled out because I realized I don't really use it all that much, and honestly, I'm not going to contribute to the subscription hell that we're living under, where a lot of these companies have realized that instead of giving us ownership to our software, they're just gonna take it away and give us subscription services so we perpetually rent our stuff forever. I have not been a huge fan of Xbox since they've absolutely demolished their entire physical marketplace. So for instance, when I purchase video games, I tend to buy them physically on disc, cartridge, whatever. Now, the reality is a lot of game companies are kind of moving towards a scenario where you're not necessarily buying complete games on disc. With the vast majority of PlayStation games, what you buy on the disc actually is theirs a 1.0 version. When you purchase certain games on a Nintendo Switch 2 or the Switch, you get access to a game key. Not a game key card, you actually get access to the whole ass game on the cartridge. Instead of connecting it to the internet and downloading the vast majority of information, the novel concept is what you pay for at the fucking store shows up in your hands. Now, when you purchase an Xbox game physically, and again, physically in the sense that is it even actually still there, or do they still actually even have publicly available physical stands for Xbox? There's this one photo from like a year ago where like somebody showed that you could purchase some consoles, and unfortunately most of the games are now these prepaid like cards that you just sort of purchase. They like validate them, and then you go home, put the code in, and you download the fucking game over. Even if you buy a disc from Xbox, the most of the times that disc will not have the game in it whatsoever. I had to wait. I'm gonna show you something really quickly. It's crazy to think that one of Xbox's best games, which from Bethesda, Indiana Jones, the only physical complete version, is the Switch 2, the system with arguably the most game key cards that I've ever seen. I don't know, I live in fucking insanity land here. So honestly, Xbox has made terrible decisions. I think back when the original E3 disaster happened with Don Matrick, where they showed Price is Right and all that shit, and how Xbox had these online-only policies, underneath people like Phil Spencer, I really think that this has reached a point where Xbox has been completely tarnished, I think, by Microsoft. And here's the thing. I think Microsoft is one of these companies that has sort of contributed to the hell that Xbox is kind of in. So anyways, I've been kind of holding off on talking about this. I've seen other content creators talk about, oh, is Xbox getting into a renaissance? Is it coming back? So a lot of this is actually happening because of their new CEO. For anybody that doesn't know, this is Asha Sharma. Back when I was like looking into her taking over Xbox, she came from like the AI divisions at Microsoft, and I was like, oh fuck, please God no. But actually, in reality, she's done a pretty good job of like making small steps towards actually like strengthening Xbox. The reality is though, any fucking CEO that isn't Phil Spencer is better. Dog, this half-empty can of seltzer water could do a better fucking job piloting Xbox than Phil fucking Spencer, if you catch my drift, okay? So anyways, they posted this letter, and it's a pretty scathing, realistic letter of where the fuck Xbox kind of is. So after an 8-month decline for Game Pass, remember when they upped the prices and everyone was like rightfully pissed? They finally said shit has started to kind of grow again. But here's the reality of it, right? A vast majority of players play Xbox and their games each year, and they play them on consoles, PCs, mobile, and streaming. So PC specifically, Xbox is not just exclusive to their hardware. When you play an Xbox game, like when I was playing Forza, I did not play it on an actual Xbox console. I played it underneath my Linux computer. I also played it on a Steam Deck, because I guess at this point, anything is a fucking Xbox. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, what they also kind of talk about here is that they're going to end this year at a 3% accountability margin, right? So over the past year, they've spent over $20 billion on investments in content, platform, and subsidizing hardware. Because yes, when you purchase an Xbox at a store, Microsoft is taking a fucking loss because that's how expensive shit has gotten. Annual revenue has declined nearly $500 million. Going forward, that just can't continue. It's unsustainable. It's a bad business model. So we are in a hardware component crisis. When I joined as a CEO, the price we paid for console storage components were over 2 times as high as we paid last fall's. These costs have also since then doubled. And as we plan for 2027, we expect another significant increase, taking over 5 times the prices we paid only 2 years earlier. So yeah, everything is not only expensive, but here's the reality of the situation. This is why I say Microsoft should just cut fucking Xbox loose. Because think about it like this. Microsoft is like an oil company, and Xbox is like a fucking solar systems energy division underneath them. The two businesses do not make fundamental sense. What I'm saying here is Microsoft as a company, big Microsoft, the big guy above, right? The company that owns Xbox, their business is entirely dependent on making all of these hardware prices expensive for us. You know, it's why I've been talking about AI slop being bad for all of us, because not only is it just destroying the fucking internet, but companies like Microsoft's entire business models is selling AI to every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there in the world. They are the reason. Your boss is the reason why your expenditures are as high. Could you imagine going into a fucking meeting, like your Xbox's CEO, and you have to go talk with the other fucking like big business heads? Like you got to talk with Microsoft proper. And Microsoft proper's like, why is it that, you're bitching about hardware costs, man? I mean, just find a way to make the Xbox cheap. I think I would lose my fucking shit and smear crap all over the fucking walls in pure insanity if I ever had to be in a meeting where I had to talk to the person bending me over the fucking table and sticking their dick deep inside me and telling them, no, sir, actually, if you stop fucking me in the ass, maybe I'll be able to do my job a little bit better, right? I'm just saying, by the way. Xbox has also spent so much money in the process of, like, buying all these studios that the bean counters at Microsoft proper are like, okay, so you made us spend, like, $80 billion fucking dollars. That $80 billion could have went towards other, AI shit that actually makes us money, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, Xbox is not really the biggest moneymaker, and never really has been for Microsoft. For Microsoft, it's selling Azure subscriptions, Windows subscriptions, or basically anything to do with their Office subscriptions, anything to do with the big boy moneymakers that are well above Xbox, right? When you go to the Xbox Player Voice, which is the one place where Xbox people can just go in, drop their fucking, statements and tell Xbox what they want, you'll see some of the top, mentions they have are exclusives. So ultimately, they're like, Xbox is built off great exclusives. You can't sell consoles without a reason to buy the console compared to your competition. And here's the thing. As much as I agree with this, Xboxes do not sell as much as they need to justify an exclusive. The vast majority of people that I've talked to and recently are playing a lot of their Xbox games, not just on Xbox, but most of them on PlayStations whenever they get a port, or again, most importantly, PCs, right? To get rid of the PlayStation market is already damaging. But a real exclusive would also mean you get rid of the PC market, which ultimately means that you want to limit access to people who are just on a bad selling console to just exclusively play games. And that would make sense if your games also didn't reportedly cost about $500 million to make. Now, I don't know the reality of some of these prices, but, there was murmurs that Halo cost around $500 million, and there's even talks now that a Gears of War game may have, the new Gears, might be like $400 fucking million. Now, here's the thing. I love Gears of War. Arguably, this is the only Xbox game that I'm really excited for. Not really Elder Scrolls. I kind of don't fucking trust anything Bethesda's doing. But Gears of War, I'm ready for it. But here's the thing. That game could be the best, highest rated game imaginable, but with a reported budget of $400 million, that basically means that they're going to take the franchise and once again put it in the fucking closet and forget about it until the cobwebs start forming around. Because no matter how good your game is, you're not making $400 million back, okay? There's only like one game that I can think of right now that is actually able to make back the ridiculous expenditure, and that's probably just like GTA 6, okay? That's that game, and that's literally only possible because that game is just on a different level of hype around it, okay? That's probably the only game that I can think of that'll do that. You know, this era of like every AAA game costing hundreds of millions of dollars to produce is so fucking unsustainable that, you know, ultimately, if this doesn't invoke a crash, I don't know what will. And not only is, you know, a crash isn't really even the worst thing, because I think for a lot of, you know, what we can say, gaming will always exist in some way or form, but AAA gaming's gotta like fucking slice and trim its budgets down. Otherwise, it's so unsustainable, especially in a market where nowadays indie games that are developed by small groups, that are developed by people that, you know, really do understand what gaming is about, are vastly competing with some of these AAA stuff out there in the industry. You know, it's almost representative of like, if you ever look into like Shenmue, for instance, right? Like Shenmue is one of those games where, you know, I made a video on it. I still do want to definitely cover the second game, but the reality of it is it's one of the most expensive projects at Sega. And the reality of this is that Sega spent so much money that it didn't directly bankrupt Sega, but it definitely hurt them financially enough to the point where the company had to go through that rough period. For anybody that doesn't remember, Sega used to make actual hardware. You know, you used to have things like the Dreamcast, the Saturn. You used to have like actual Sega hardware, right? Like back in the day, Sega used to make consoles alongside Nintendo. Now, where is Sega right now? Well, because they stopped making those systems, and now that they focused on a lot of their good IPs like Sonic, Persona, Like a Dragon, Alien Isolation, and God knows what else, they have finally managed to kind of come back, claw themselves up to like actual serious relevance, and it's a great thing. And I think if Xbox has to survive, they kind of have to go this weird Sega route where, first and most importantly, you have to cut with a company like Microsoft. And the other reality of it too is that there's even been talks right now that Xbox is closing down more and more of their like studios and more of their teams, which is insane, right? Like, it doesn't matter if like the richest tech company in the world basically owns you. If you're not making good money, if you're not making more than, you know, what it costs to keep you active, they will just slice you. They will just trim you down and use whatever money they spend on you to fuel the AI industry and the dragon they're fucking chasing right now. That's what's going on, okay? That's the harsh reality of the situation. It doesn't matter who the fucking CEO of Microsoft is. Having all of these IPs that they bought that are basically sitting there dormant while the company just like tweedles its thumbs to figure out what they do is not a good play to have. You know, it's similar to places like Embracer Group, where ultimately, at the end of the day, they bought a bunch of IPs that we all love. IPs like Deus Ex, for instance, and some of these Deus Ex games that they were working on were just canceled because Embracer Group was like, they don't see a path to like making money out of it. I hate the fact that some of these companies have consolidated so many of our beloved IPs and so many gaming teams that ultimately, at the end of the day, it seems like we get less and less of what we used to get, right? It seems like we get less and less of these focused game releases and more of these AAA releases that ultimately either fail or, you know, the company rolls them into some live service crap that is also destined to mostly fail in every capacity. You know, I think the worst thing to happen to the gaming industry is like, you know, you get like a bunch of these scumbag, like fucking business-minded like people to come in. They have no interest in gaming whatsoever. They just look at, you know, the next big game IP and they're like, all right, release a game, put a battle pass in it, put like every form of monetization, and see how that rolls by for the average gamer, right? Like combining an artistic industry with like a shopping mall mindset where somebody purchases a video game, comes in and installs it, and the first thing they get barraged with is what more can they buy in a game they probably haven't even fucking launched or like actually haven't like seen gameplay of yet. That is an insane fucking way to go down. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think for a company like Microsoft, they need to just chop off Xbox. Xbox needs to fly in its own direction. They need to go off. They need to carry these IPs that they have under their belt. It's obviously very unrealistic. Microsoft would probably shutter everything before they even think of giving up the Xbox IP and letting it roam free. But if you want this brand to survive, okay, if you want Xbox to really survive, the fucking dragon that governs it needs to leave it alone, okay? You know, this is why I've been so restricted on talking about it. I wanted to wait until good information was solid, but the more good information that comes out about Xbox, the more bad information that comes out about Xbox too. And where does that all tie into? It's the fucking leadership around them. Microsoft is doing basically everything they can to hamper the entire Xbox division. You know, these people are competing with the same business, the same industry that is putting them into the fucking ground, right? Kind of in a way. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you know what, Xbox, I really do wish the best for it, simply because it has been such an important part of my teenage years, my childhood, that to kind of see it in the state that it is, it's fucking sad. It really is, right? Like, a lot of these big gaming companies are in sad positions in some way, in some respects. But Xbox is probably arguably in the worst of it, to the point where even if they leave the hardware race, which I don't want to see that, but it might be the only way for them to kind of survive, is to just focus on the games that they have, get these budgets down to like normal, reasonable amounts, and actually release these games in a proper format, you know, actually release these games in a timely manner, right? You know, nobody's going to be interested in gaming franchises that release every 5 or 6 years, you know? Like, you got to be releasing these pretty actively. You got to be releasing these, you know, on a pretty consistent basis. And ultimately that involves in like taking the scope of these games and like narrowing them down so that they're focused, fun, great experiences, and make your fucking money, right? Like, I hate to be bringing Sega back into this in every capacity, but ultimately for me, some of the best games that I've played in the last, 6, 8 years have been literally from Sega, have literally been from some of these Japanese studios that have kind of tapered themselves down and made more focused experiences, and ultimately are experiences that are far better than even some of the big AAA guys are bringing, right? You know, JRPGs, grew up with them a whole heck of a lot. And nowadays, it's like the best JRPGs that I play are probably not from like Square Enix or like studios making these AAA Final Fantasy, like Devil May Cry spin-offs or mainline entries, but it's usually from companies like Sega where they're like, oh, yeah, you grew up with Dragon Quest, let's make a modern version of that, you know? And it's going to be good. And you'll enjoy it. You know, you like horror games? Here, we're going to make Alien Isolation, and then we're going to wait like 10 years and make another hopeful banger out of it, right? And even when you look at the indie games industry, it's like, hey, you like horror games? Well, hey, listen, you know, here's Routine, right? Even if you look at Japan, it's like, hey, here's Resident Evil, right? Hey, here's Silent Hill games again. And when you look at the American AAA gaming industry, it's like, here's a game, here's shopping markets attached to it, another live service. No, also we're going to spend like 10-year gaps between each of these releases, so people who enjoyed the game initially, they're grown up and doing something far different. And this new generation that's coming in, they don't really give a fuck about the nostalgia to begin with, right? It's like the Halo 1 remake. Like, the Halo 1 remake to me is one of those things where somebody's like, is it necessary? And I'm like, to be honest with you, the new market, the new gamer audience, probably hasn't even played the last Halo remake. Like, this is a brand new fucking game for these people. Why? Because that's where we're at now. And we're stuck in this culture of remakes where these companies are putting hundreds of millions of dollars into remaking these games that we've already kind of played before, so the hype isn't necessarily there anymore, but they're too fucking scared to spend that same amount of money, rightfully so, on the same IP, but with a whole new entry. Because who knows how that goes, right? It's such a weird business to kind of be in. But if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like it if you dislike it. I am out.